started by, the idea came about from a guy named Eugene Rubens Alki. He was a French auto mechanic, and he was deaf, but he was very passionate about sports. See, he himself was a cyclist, and he was always really interested in getting deaf people involved in sports and kind of promoting them. So it really brought about the idea to get an Olympics started for deaf people. So he really tried to model it after the Olympics and try to get it to be about the same, about on the same level, but exclusively for deaf people. To get them a chance to excel, on a high stage. Eugene was actually known as the deaf version of Baron de Coubertin, who was the founder of the original Olympics. He didn't live to high class, I guess, would you say? He lived in an attic apartment, barely furnished, just got by, but was very passionate. For what he did, and that drove him, to start, the Deaf Olympics, and he was president of the Deaf Olympics from 1924, from when it started, till 1953. So he was actually the longest reigning president there, and since then there's been, quite a few presidents, and the one. Sorry about that. The camera ran out of battery, so to pick up where I left off, I was talking about Craig Crowley, who is the current president of the Deaf Olympics now. He's the 8th president. He was a British chief executive officer with senior and executive management experience in voluntary organizations. Craig was previously a sports coach. He himself was a Deaf Olympian and was also the founding president of UK Deaf Sports. And a big reason why there are the Deaf Olympics is just give deaf people a chance to, join in and really come together and show off their talents and really become part and show that they're part of an organization or, an elite group. There's special in society, but they can also perform at the same level as a normal person they can hear. And in these games, it's a little bit different in the way they set it up because, you're thinking like a track meet or something, when to start the race or something, you hear a gun go off, or in basketball there's, a whistle, from the referees anytime there's like a timeout or a foul called, and deaf people can't hear that. So there's different, it's kind of altered a little bit in the way they run things. So it's just like, special games for them by deaf people. And as I said earlier, it's one of the world's fastest growing, sporting events out there. Up there with the regular modern Olympics. So.
That's cool. Okay, well, I looked at organizations that dealt with deaf children, and the majority of the organizations that I found didn't necessarily deal directly with children, but more so informing parents of how to raise children who are deaf. One of the organizations that I came across was the American Society for Deaf Children. It was founded in 1967, and it's a parents helping parents kind of organization where they provide support and encouragement to families with deaf children. They believe that the goal of the organization is that each person should be able to reach their full potential in society, and they try to meet that goal by educating parents, and especially since parents are the ones making decisions for their kids, especially with cochlear implants versus ASL, that kind of thing. They provide resources for parents, like if you're a new parent and you just find out that you have a deaf child, you get 1 year free without having to pay any membership fees or anything. They provide a lot of education. They provide access to being able to influence what kind of decisions are made in education laws and that kind of thing. They do workshops and conferences, and they provide information about IDEA and how it impacts their children in schools. They also provide lists of camps and activities for kids so that parents have a way to get their children involved in the deaf community. And it's mainly for parents who are hearing and don't really know how help their child experience both worlds. Another organization that I found is called Beginnings for Parents with Children Who are Deaf or Hard of Hearing. It was founded in 1987. They are impartial to the approach of how to meet the diverse needs of different families. So their main goal is to promote early intervention and early detection, because they believe that any kind of communication is really important from early ages. So the earlier that you know and the earlier that parents get involved in being able to communicate with their child, the better. Whether that means that they're using speech or ASL. They give resources to parents, lists of professionals that they can contact. They show how to teach children who are deaf languages. They provide preschool programs that people can get involved in.
So this organization has different things online where it describes the different kinds of education that children can get, whether it's visual, oral, or a combination of the two, and they do a really good job of describing to parents what's available to their children. They also provide a description on the different kinds of technology that can be used, like cochlear implants, hearing aids, soundboards, that kind of thing. They also provide a good detail about school issues and requirements, and also different legislation that's in effect for people who are deaf. There's also organizations around the country that do things that provide like community-based activities for children who are deaf or hard of hearing. And then Ansley touched on this a little bit. The Junior National Association for the Deaf is an organization for 7th to 12th graders specifically that promotes leadership, citizenship, and scholarship through projects, conferences, and contests, and other activities for those who are deaf, and it's run by youth who are deaf. And then they also provide a month-long leadership camp each summer for kids who are deaf.
There are also a lot of organizations focused more on adults who are deaf and people who become deaf later in their life. One of the main ones is the Association of Late Deafened Adults. And the late deafened adults are people who have lost the ability to understand speech with or without hearing aids after acquiring spoken knowledge. So it would be their second language, either ASL or lip reading. It's a nonprofit organization with the objectives of providing education, advocacy, role models, and support for people with these hearing losses. They have an official communication policy, which is whatever works, meaning they allow sign language, lip reading, hearing aids, cochlear implants. They support any of those kind of methods. They reach out to the deafened individuals regardless of their age of onset who are seeking their place in the deaf culture. They provide a place for the deaf hearing couples to socialize with other people who are facing similar issues. When a spouse becomes deafened later in life, it's often difficult for the other spouse to deal with this loss, and so they have to find means to cope with it and learn potentially another language to still be able to communicate. So this organization helps them to not only learn those languages, but also communicate with other people. They also host an annual ALDA Con, a conference that features speakers and workshops to people and vendors with latest technologies for deaf people and resources. It's also very famous for their karaoke party, and this year it's being hosted in Indianapolis. The ALDA also has an LDA chat, which is kind of an email discussion group for people who have become deafened later in their life, to support each other and just talk about the experiences they're having with their new deafness. It provides support and information to anyone with hearing loss. It was established in 2000 and now has over 600 members on the chat room. Members of the ALDA also have quarterly newsletters, the ALDA News and the ALDA Biz. The ALDA News prides itself on being a premier newsletter for hard of hearing or late deafened adults, They feature articles written by people and for people with hearing loss, and the